Then I don't want to tell you that it's 75 and sunny in Houston.
Yeah, thank you so much. Y'all deserve that, though. You really deserve that. You need to have a few nice days.
We really do.
Are you ready? Well, the Community and Technical College Formula Advisory Meeting is called to order. I am Pam Anglin from Paris Junior College, serving as chair. Please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast over the internet and recorded, so I would ask all attendees to silence your cell phones. For those attending via teleconference, please mute your phone until you are ready to speak. This prevents any background noise. Thank you. Mr. Gilmore, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Crawford?
Here.
Mr. Maldonado? Dr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Cervantes?
Here.
Ms. Wicklund?
Here.
Mr. Yiannopoulos? Here. Mr. Reeser?
Here.
Dr. Riza?
Here.
Dr. Anglin?
Here.
Dr. Rhodes?
Here.
Dr. McMillan?
Here.
Ms. Elizondo?
Here. A quorum is present. As a reminder, members on the call are permitted to vote. We'll begin with item 2, which is consideration and approval of the minutes from October 14th, 2019 meeting. The draft minutes were included in your meeting materials. Do members have comments, questions, or corrections to the draft minutes?
No.
Okay. If we have
I move
none,
to accept.
did you have something, Dr. Wallace?
No, I was moving to accept.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. And we have a second from Terry Crawford. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Item 3 is discussion, review, and consideration of the Commissioners' 2022-23 biennium charges. We'll begin with Charge 1, which is study and make recommendations for the appropriate funding levels for the contact hour, core, and student success funding. We were to review the draft for the state college funding, recommendations provided in the meeting materials relating to Charge 1, which is to set funding levels and rates. Do we have any further discussion? Ms. Wicklund, do you have anything to say on those?
Yes. So in the committee discussion and recommendations, we are recommending that the funding to the state college formula be increased to $71.4 million, which is an increase of $6 million or 9.2%. This will fund $56.5 million to the instruction and administration formula, which would be $5.8 million or an 11.4% increase. This funding level assumes a rate of $10.47 per contact hour, an increase of 24 cents or 2.3%. And it also assumes a contact hour growth rate of 8.9%. And we, the work group, updated the actual contact hours for fall of 19 to reflect this suggested increase, and so it was more factual, and so the numbers support the increase and the projected growth. And then the committee recommends funding $14.8 million to the space support formula and small institutional supplement, which would be an increase of $200,000. This funding level assumes a 0.9% increase for growth in adjusted predicted square feet and a 2.3% increase for inflation. The committee recommends splitting the space support rate between utilities and operations and maintenance components using fiscal year 20 utility rates, update the utility rate adjustment factors using the fiscal year 20 utilities expenditures, and allocate the space support formula using the fall 20 predicted square feet. The committee also recommends funding the small institutional supplement using the same methodology and rate as the 2021 biennium. And that was our recommendations from the committee.
Do I hear a motion to approve the State College funding recommendation?
I make a motion we approve.
I will second.
Okay, we had a motion to approve by Mr. Yiannopoulos and a second by Mr. Cervantes. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay. The State College recommendation on funding has been approved to move forward. Ms. Wickland, do you have any updates from the work group for the community colleges?
Dr. Anglin, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah. I will go through where we are with the community college funding recommendation. At this point, we are at a core increase, which would to $2 million per biennium per college district. This would be an overall $32 million increase to our funding formula. Increasing success points to $215 per point. Based on current success points, that would be a $32.1 million increase. A contact hour increase to $5.57 per contact hour from a current $5.44. That would be a $44.8 million increase. And then the BAT would remain flat from the previous biennium at $40.70 per semester credit hour, which would amount to a $0.5 million increase. The total increase in funding for the community colleges would be $109.4 million. What we will do is make a chart with a listing of items that have happened over the last few years that have caused our core operations to cost more, such as our work with guided pathways, student success initiatives, 60 by 30 Texas, dual credit degree plans, requiring additional community college activities in the high school by HB 3, new safety and security requirements that we've had to put in place, new Title IX requirements that we've all had to put in place, the free classes, adding additional areas that students can take classes tuition free, which cost us more. And some of these costs are now starting to move into our infrastructure and adding additional infrastructure expenses. So over the next 2 or 3 months, we will be building that chart, seeking input from all 50 community colleges and looking at what it cost per college on each of these new items that we've had to add, which are really basic core expenses to our colleges. So this is where we are right now. We hope to bring a formal written proposed recommendation to the full committee at our December committee meeting.
Do we need a motion for accept?
No, we'll have a formal recommendation that will come out in our agenda for the December meeting.
Okay.
So this is just where what the work group has approved earlier this morning, and then we'll be finalizing the wording of it and starting that work to work on our list.
Dr. England, will you send a list of those items so we don't leave something out?
I will. I'll put an email together to go out to all 50 colleges with those items that we've come up with, asking additional items to be added, and then we'll go back, work with the CFOs to ask for estimated cost on those items. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion on charge 1 before we move to charge 2? Okay. Then we'll move to charge 2, which is study and make recommendations for the appropriate funding level for and the refinement of Texas State Technical College Systems Return Value Funding Formula. We were to review the draft for the Texas State Technical College funding recommendations provided in the meeting materials relating to Charge 2, which is to set funding levels rates. Do we have any discussion on what was presented in your board material?
If I could, Madam Chair, this is Mike Reeser. I had the honor of serving as the work group chairman, and I wanted to commend the coordinating board staff, particularly Roland, for all of the hard work, legwork, and number crunching that were done in support of our ultimate recommendation. The work just couldn't happen without him, and so the co-board has all of our appreciation.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to approve the Texas State Technical College funding recommendation?
That's so
This
moved.
is Dr. Wallace. I would make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
You got it.
Okay. We have Dr. Wallace making the motion, Jim Yiannopoulos seconding. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay. Then we have our recommendation for charge 2 approved. We'll move to charge 3, which is study and make recommendations on the efficacy of critical need fields as they relate to contact hour and success point funding. There are no recommendations at this time. Dr. McMillan, do you have any work group updates?
I do, thank you. Dr. Cervantes, Dr. Rhodes, and I were able to join the TAC Metrics Task Force after the last formal advisory meeting and discuss these items, and staff from the co-board joined us there as well. And I think we made substantial progress on our understanding of critical fields and what we might be able to do with those. And so if you'll endure my history lesson here that I have learned through the process, I think it's important for all the committee members to know. Targeted fields, there's targeted fields for success point funding and contact hour funding, and those are different. Contact hour funding started, the critical fields started, we think, in 1999, and that was the last time that those were updated. The success points critical fields started at the inception of success points, and that was the last time those were updated by a committee outside of the legislature. This last session, the legislature did update the success points by adding different points into the system, or not success points, critical fields by adding fields into the system, and so that led to a change. We also have a rider in the current bill pattern that would raise the value of success points, critical fields, to 3.0 from 2.25, and decrease the value of other awards, and I'm not going to go into that at this point. There is a recommendation that we'll see emerge from this work group to update the process for defining what a critical field is. In fact, we are working to change the language from critical field to targeted field. Need to know if that's a problem for any coordinating board reasons, the way it's referred to in the system, and so on. But that does seem to have some attractiveness to the committee and to the TAC Metrics Task Force. And as we look at critical fields for contact hours are funded based upon hours in classes, so the unit of analysis is a class, not a program. Critical fields for success points is based upon completion of a program, and that is a different unit of analysis, so the program. So you actually may have critical field contact hour funding in classes that are not in critical field success point programs, or you may have non-critical field classes in critical field success point classes. It's really confusing, but they're different. They're not the same. And so we looked at that and went into trying to figure out how would we have any recommendation at all without a lot of deeper analysis around critical fields and contact hour funding. And I think the recommendation you'll see coming forward is don't do anything with critical field contact hour funding, formula funding at this point, but you will see a recommendation coming forward on targeted field. I'll start referring to it as targeted fields for success points. And so I want to go into how we would get to that point. A lot of work, as Chancellor Reeser mentioned, the coordinating board staff earlier, same thing is true in this case. A lot of work went into trying to narrow down a methodology to get to a list of fields that we would look at. And as Julie mentions, it's somewhat science and art. And so I'll go through the methodology here. So a critical field or a targeted field we will recommend would need to meet at least two of the following. It would be in the top 20th largest growth fields for certificates and associate degrees in the state of Texas, the top 20 fastest growth fields that are the lead to certificate and associate in the state of Texas, or a top targeted occupation. And so it needs to check the box on 2 of 3 of those. Top targeted occupation, there are 2 ways it can become a top targeted occupation. One is the Texas Workforce Commission has a list of top targeted occupations. If it's on that list, that's how it becomes the top targeted occupation. Or 11 workforce boards. If 11 workforce boards have it on their list, then that would be the other way it could check the box for top targeted occupation. So the methodology looked at right now, and the committee may come back with some slight changes as we look through the data and so on, but this looks like it's real promising for us. Top 20 largest, top 20 fastest, or top targeted occupations. Check 2 of those boxes, and then you go to a second criteria, and that relies around 2 things: the supply and demand, and also livable wage. And so if it meets 2 of the above, plus the wages are at or above the state median, and demand exceeds supply, then it would be on the critical field or targeted field list. If it meets the 2 above and the wages do not meet the state median average, then the supply would need to be outstripped. The demand would need to be outstripped by supply and demand needs to be off by at least 50%. And so that would be, those fields we think need a little more, this is where the art piece comes in, need a little more analysis and try to understand what's going on inside of those fields. And for example, do most of the people in those fields have a certificate or associate degree in the state? Try to do some deeper analysis. We realize that there is some possibility of emerging fields, and we need to be able to pay attention to those things as well. Additional to that, in fact, I'll pause right there and see if anybody has any questions about the methodology or the thought process behind critical fields. Okay. So we're working through how you would update and what that process would look like. And this is just an idea for the moment, but it seems logical that it could be an update that happens more regular than it has in the past. It perhaps could be as frequent as this committee itself meets. Maybe it is this committee that works on that. Maybe it is a committee separate from this committee that works on it but gives the feedback to this group. But it seems like if you're going to put this in the pattern of funding from the state, it needs to be in line with that rhythm and process. The fact that the critical fields are or the funding is based upon a 3-year average. So if you took something off the critical field list today, you still have a 3-year average, and you would get the next funding cycle, at least one of those years would still have been a critical field defined during that time. So there's some, how do you go into a critical field, because it takes 3 years to get to an average? And then how does it ramp down after it fails to be a critical field or targeted field going forward? We've got some first looks at what that might be, but those need further discussion with the coordinating board, just to make sure we understand collection of data and timeliness, and can we make it all work for, what could be presented to this group now that helps inform, all those decisions, with ultimately the decision to go or not on those, I guess, remaining with our recommendation being accepted with the legislature. So a lot of work has happened. Last time we studied this, we didn't make recommendations on success points, and so I'm pleased to say that we've made some progress. We don't have the data to look at quite just yet, but that's coming, and that work group and the task force will both be looking at those items. So, any questions or comments on that? I think we'll be ready for recommendation next month on this.
Any further discussion? We'll move to charge 4, which is evaluate the continued relevancy of each success point and its components given various state-level policy changes, the increased focus on fields of study, and the implementation of the co-requisite model in developmental education, and study and make recommendations for the appropriate number of points to be awarded for each metric. We have no recommendations at this time. Dr. McMillan, do you have any work group updates?
I do. So the work group has looked at data and is continuing to look at some emerging data on updates to the success points. But at its base, we are recommending that the current funding, the current success point weights remain, and that we do some things additive to that. And a suggestion is an alternative to the rider that's in the bill pattern. So under college readiness, with developmental math, reading, and writing, leave those the same at 1, half a point, and half a point. First college level course, each one of those are 1 point currently for math, reading, and writing. Leave those as they are. In the progress towards credential, the 15 hours of completion, that is one where you see a new recommendation coming, and we're getting the data to crunch that on. And that is if the students' 15 hours are all dual credit, to add a quarter point to that particular success point. We feel that furthers the state's goals in having students move towards credentials. We know that dual credit's a very successful model, and we feel like this rewards that work that is different and different and challenging financially for institutions, and acknowledges that work. That's something we heard from the presidents. Under credentials awarded, degree and certificate awarded 2 points, leave that at 2 points, and then treat everything else that I'm about to mention as a bonus. And so the first one would be the targeted fields that I just mentioned would be a quarter point bonus. Actually, that's currently the case, is those are already a quarter point bonus, but rename them as targeted fields. And then add a quarter of a point for academically disadvantaged and a quarter of a point for economically disadvantaged. And academically disadvantaged are students who have not, who were, I'm going to say this wrong, Julie, so tell me what our latest version of academically disadvantaged are.
My understanding is that you were looking at students who were determined to be not college ready under the Texas Success Initiative coming in, based on however that determination was made, whether it's the TSIA or if they were exempt because they were ready from ACT, SAT, et cetera, they would not be included in that not ready. So our normal definition for that, yeah.
So the state definition of not college ready is what we're using. And as she does mention, and as I talked about this with my local team, they said, well, what about the exceptions that we make for students? And really those don't fall in this category. So, but it still recognizes something we're measuring at the state level for college readiness, and it gives us an acknowledgement and awareness of the challenges that are associated with educating those students and getting them to where they need to be. Economically disadvantaged is that they were, and Julie, I want to make sure I've said this right. I said Pell eligible, but I think there's also some dialogue around that. Before she shares further, at the time the point is awarded, we're looking back 10 years in that student's history. If they've had either of those two things in their life in that 10-year span, then that quarter of a point gets awarded. So Julie, help clarify on that.
Yes, I want to make two clarifications. First, in reviewing the notes from the last meeting where I believe I called in from the airport in Providence, Rhode Island, I misspoke, and you were talking about the 10-year point and Pell eligible, and the 10 years was correct, and I think I said that's correct. But we actually, the analysis that we've done on this, we've just been looking to see if a student ever received Pell over that 10 years. And that's really the proxy that we've used for Pell eligible. So often we'll talk about Pell eligible, but because we're not allowed to use the FAFSA data to directly determine if someone received Pell or not, we've used that as a proxy. However, we have also proposed, I'm a little too close here, proposed for a proxy looking at estimated family contribution and trying to include some of those students who may not receive Pell. However, right now there may be some challenges even around that in terms of use of that data. So I think we need to look into that a little bit more, but certainly using whether someone received or ever received Pell is viable, and we'd have to look into it a little more in terms of whether we could do more with eligible in terms of a proxy.
So always the devil's in the details, right?
Yes, unfortunately on this one, very much so.
But philosophically, though, acknowledging that students that have economic challenges, that they may need additional support, and we give that support, and recognizing the way in which we give that by adding a quarter point for that particular success point is something that we would recommend. And I think the work group will be looking at this issue of Pell eligible, Pell received, or a proxy for EFC.
Yes.
And maybe we'll have some conversation, and hopefully we'll have some resolution by the time we meet again.
Dr. McMillan, a question. That economically disadvantaged, that would include students who are on free lunch and free breakfast program? I mean, we're talking at that level, or?
So one of the challenges with, you're mentioning dual credit, I'm assuming, one of the challenges with dual credit is actually presented in both of these cases, I believe, academically and economically disadvantaged. We don't necessarily have that data pulled into the system, and which I know it's not a direct correlation with the hour we get, the quarter point you get for the 15 hours being all dual credit, but I guess you could look at it as that helps to offset some of the fact that we're not capturing those students that are academically or economically disadvantaged. I think the challenge there is just getting the data, and so I don't know if you want to speak to that or.
Yeah, we here have the data that we get from institutions about whether a student has been awarded Pell, but for us to determine whether someone who's still in high school was economically disadvantaged, we would have to request to use data from the Texas Education Agency, which is something we haven't done.
And the other piece is this success point is at the time they receive a credential, and so that would really limit you in the instance where that student is receiving the credential in advance of high school graduation, but if they graduated and then come to you, then they were Pell eligible or Pell qualified or academically disadvantaged. Most likely not going to be academically disadvantaged if they've gone through a lot of the Pell or a lot of the dual credit, but you would perhaps get a point at that juncture. Is that correct?
That's right. So if someone enrolled in the community college after high school and received Pell, they would automatically pulled in because it's anytime Pell. And we can also provide you the information for right now, how many students are earning credentials in high school, if that would help to give you some sense of the scope of those numbers.
Would you like to see that?
So if I could ask another question around this. Would we include students who receive financial aid after filling out the TASPA?
And that's something that has been raised, and we can talk about in terms of what might be allowable.
Well, House Bill
so-
3 requires, in 2021 or 2020, that all high school graduating seniors have filed for FAFSA, which in our case is going to impact us because they're going to come to us to do that. And once again, we can add that to that list. So, yeah.
And Terry, thank you for mentioning that, and I'm sorry I didn't recognize you as a valuable member of that work group and the TAC Metrics Task Force. But I think that is what you're talking about, Julie, under looking at a EFC and another proxy for that. And so I don't know the ultimate conclusion of that, but I know, and I don't know today, but I know that up to 8% of some of our institutions' student bodies may use that, or may have the students that potentially would use that. I don't know if that data is true or not, but that's what I've heard from my colleagues. And so that's where the question is coming from.
Yeah, and I think it's simply, probably we need to sit down with general counsel. We can look at what possibly could be used that's derived from TASFA and comes in through our financial aid data set versus what's derived from FAFSA. But there have been some changes in terms of guidance coming from the feds regarding use of FAFSA. So we just want to be sure if, we're moving forward in a way that's legally appropriate in terms of coming up with a proxy.
I'd like to go back to my question on the free lunch and free breakfast. And it's going to have an effect. It's going to have an impact on all of us. It is on us now and has been for 3 years, because we have to make accommodations for that, for those early college high school students, for their free breakfast and their free lunch. And we're not being asked to provide it, but we're being asked to provide the space, the ability to get the food, and there's standards that they have to meet, that the high school has to meet. So I, in essence, had to give up an entire part of my culinary arts program just for them 2 times a day to feed 800 of those students. So it's going to impact us, and I think it's going to impact everybody as they grow into those programs. And I can see us growing into that because there's a lot of money on the table for those ISDs under House Bill 3 to do that. So that's why I asked the question.
So good additional feedback. Any other dialogue around academically or economically disadvantaged you'd like the work group to go through? Okay. So I'm going to move on down to transfer. We would ask that remain the same at 2 points and treat the bonus points of a quarter point for academically and economically disadvantaged on that. The rider recommendations fell in the credentials awarded, adding more weights to the targeted fields, and it also fell into the transfer space, adding more points to transfer. The recommendations coming from the work group does that. It just does that in a little different manner, recognizing academically and economically disadvantaged, and also tackling the challenge of identifying targeted fields going forward. So I'm hopeful we'll have a recommendation in December. If not, we'll meet again in January.
Is there any further comments, discussion from anyone? If not, we will move to charge 6, which is study and make recommendations for the appropriate definition of a student in a structured co-enrollment program successfully completing at least 15 semester credit hours at the community college. We were to review the draft recommendation for a definition of a structured co-enrollment program provided in the meeting materials relating to charge 6. Did I skip 5?
Skip 5.
Now, I'm sitting here, but I mean, that's totally possible.
That's on the 8-week course.
Okay, we're gonna do 6 and then we're gonna do 5. Okay,
Outstanding.
yeah, because it's all out of my person. Yeah.
Strategy.
Okay.
So the reason she's doing that is the work group that had worked on critical fields or targeted fields and success points also worked on Charge 6 because that folds into success point funding that the legislature provided for co-enrollment programs. And the coordinating board had asked us to consider an official definition of that. And you have that in your packet, but I will read that for those in the audience. Texas Higher Education Board recognized programs structured through a binding written agreement between a general academic institution and a community college. Under such a program, students will be admitted to both institutions and recognized as having matriculated to both institutions concurrently. And I believe that's acceptable to the coordinating board, and the work group is making that recommendation. I think we would like to act on that today, partly just because we want to act on something. All this other work's taking so long, so.
If you want me to make the motion, I will, Jeremy. I'm on the committee. So I'll make the motion.
So we have a motion from Mr. Yiannopoulos, a second from Dr. Riza. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. For charge 6, the recommendation. And charge 5, which is study and make recommendations.
Pam, I believe your microphone might be off. We can barely hear you.
You're right. I forgot to hit the button. Sorry, y'all. We'll move to charge 5, which is study and make recommendations for the appropriate methodology for including the second 8-week courses in the base period. We were to review the draft recommendation for a methodology for including the second 8 weeks courses in the base period provided in the meeting materials relating to charge 5. See, Dr. Wallace?
Yes.
You have any comments on, you chaired the work group?
Right. Just a couple of comments. Basically, what you're seeing is a similar approach that we took the last session, last biennium. We talked to several of our colleagues who are heavily involved in 8-week. They believe that to be correct. But I would say that the recommendation is made for this if, in the event, we don't figure out a mechanism for reporting of actuals. If that doesn't become an option, then that is our approach. And so you have that recommendation there. You see all the different initial and final run options. I won't go through those, but I remind the committee it's for the formula funding. There are other considerations in allowing institutions to report 8-week courses on the beginning of the semester, fall and spring CBN reports versus reporting them as flex courses the following semester. We've always had that option allowed. I also, like Mike, applaud the coordinating board on their work on this and helping us put all this together. It's a lot of information, but in this proposal, the coordinating board would provide a truncated report schedule for institutions that wish to include these courses in their fall head count. And I would note that the schedule with 10-week courses followed by 6-week courses would not allow sufficient time for reporting enrollments in 6-week session on the beginning of the semester report. Fortunately, schools are most interested in offering either 8-week or offering 16 and 12. So with 12-week courses starting 4 weeks into the semester. So we seem to be pretty good, and we've got a pretty vetted out recommendation, and we would ask the committee consider moving to adopt that.
Do I hear a motion to approve the methodology for including the second 8-week courses in the base period?
So moved.
Okay, Terry Crawford made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Riza seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We have approved the recommendation for charge 5. The next item is to plan for subsequent meetings. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 4th at 1:00 p.m. Work groups should have their remaining draft recommendations for final discussion and approval by the full committee. Our next item is for adjournment. If there are no further questions or points of discussion, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Yiannopoulos, a second by Dr. Riza to adjourn. The Community and Technical Colleges Formula Advisory Committee is adjourned until December 4th, 2019 at 1:00 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye, all.
Thank you very much.